Well, welcome everybody. I'm so happy that you're here with me tonight. This evening, we're talking about course selection and summer planning, how your child's choices now can affect their college options later on. So one of the questions I asked when folks came in is what brought you here tonight? So let's take a look at what people are saying. Heather said, any tips on starting the college process? She also said, how do you balance a challenging curriculum with the need of your child to maintain their mental health? How hard is too hard when it comes to academic rigor and course selection? Blake says, do you have advice on a schedule for the senior year? RuPaul wants to know about specific summer planning advice. Amir, exploring options of what my student can do to enrich his experience and improve his chances of college admissions. Dana wants to know about options for a sophomore. Arlene said, how soon do parents need to start helping their kids plan for college? Is 8th grade too early? Blake also asks, what summer activities do colleges look for? Lisa, I was intrigued by the title of the webinar. What can our student do to stand out? Bethel says, course selection for next year and summer internships she wants to know about. Julie says, best choices for summer activities. So thank you for everybody for including their information. I will be sure that we get to all of these questions. And if we don't, please, throughout the webinar, I'm going to be taking questions. So if I don't circle back to yours, please ask me again. And then again at the end of the presentation. So for the last 25 years, actually, in March next month will be 25 years since I started Educational Connections in 1998. My team and I have been helping kids to do better in school and to improve their chances of college admission. Tonight, I have an expert in the house, one of our college planners, Lisa Gastaldi. So Lisa, welcome. I'm so glad you're here tonight.
Thank you. And I'm, listening to those questions, I think we've got it covered. So we'll get through them all.
Awesome. That's fabulous. So Lisa is a college consultant here at Educational Connections, and she actually has over 20 years in the field as a college counselor and a school counselor, and she is national board certified. She has a master's in counseling psychology, and she is a member of a number of organizations that are specific to college planning and college admission. Lisa has helped over 4,000 students apply and get into the college of their choice. And these include top universities like the Ivies, UVA, Duke, University of Chicago, the California schools, Stanford, and UNC. And I think just as importantly, she's visited over 500 campuses throughout the country. So Lisa, tonight we're talking about high school course selection. This is when most students are in the throes of it. What is important when it comes to picking courses? And, one of the parents asked about academic rigor without throwing their kid over the deep end.
Yeah, so students are making these important decisions right now on their courses for next year. And the number one factor in college applications, ask any admissions officer, is they're looking for two things. What type of courses did the student take and what were the grades earned? So what type of courses, honors or AP courses? So students should take challenging courses, but they have to be comfortable with the rigor. Colleges will look at the high school that your student is coming from and see what was the highest course in that particular area and did your student take it. So students applying to those highly selective schools are potentially taking maybe 7 to 12 total AP courses. Some students might be stronger in the math and science area, while others enjoy humanities. So colleges want to know that you're ready for college level work and to prove to them that you would stretch yourself academically. My advice would be to think about how you can elevate your course difficulty over years. Maybe increase the level in one or two areas. keeping in mind that minimum graduation requirements are not necessarily what colleges are looking for. And I'll give you an example. So foreign language, some high schools require 2 years to graduate from high school. Most colleges, most highly competitive colleges will want 3, potentially 4 years of the foreign language. Same thing with the lab science. Some high school graduation requirement might be only 3 lab sciences, and colleges might want 4 lab sciences.
So what about electives? How can those courses help college admission?
So I love it when kids take electives because they are exploring some of their opportunities that they potentially could major in. And I'll give you an example, whether school offers engineering courses, health professions, entrepreneurship, or business courses, yearbook. I think it can help direct students to what their potential major is if they try out some of these courses. I know that someone asked about senior year courses. So senior year courses, seniors want to continue with the rigor because college admissions people will see the course schedule for the senior year, and sometimes they will ask for a mid-year grade report. So they're also looking at the grades that are coming from first semester. So I've seen a lot of colleges that what they do is they defer a student because they're waiting to hear about those mid-year grades.
I've seen that too, Lisa. Sometimes students, that parents every day, they call our office looking for help for the college admissions process. And sometimes when we get kids later on in the process, we have a program called Senior Express, really kind of for those last minute seniors. And sometimes we see that kids kind of took a shortcut their senior year, and they have a heavy course load their junior year, but they really didn't take anything challenging their senior year. And it's tough because if you do get deferred or waitlisted, you want to send forth a strong course schedule with good grades. So that's important too. So let's talk about the summer. That's why we're here tonight. Why is the summer so important?
So I want to emphasize that kids can still have fun in the summer. It's not all work. But the college counselor in me wants their activities to have some purpose. So college and universities want to see what students have done with their free time. We've talked before about personal narratives and brands in past webinars, and it's a good place to start identifying passions or to commit to a deeper involvement in a specific thing. So we'll talk more about what to do in the summer in a little bit.
And I'm glad we're talking about it, honestly, at this time of year, because we actually had this webinar last year in May. And I think it was just too late because some of the summer programs that you're going to talk about in a few slides, they really require kids to apply earlier than May. Hence, this earlier date this year. So let's start out with our juniors. These are current juniors, rising seniors, and then we'll double back and talk about younger students too. And to answer that one question that parents said, is 8th grade too early to start thinking about this? And the answer is absolutely not. Because right now, I know, Lisa, you work with a lot of 8th graders, actually. You're helping those 8th graders with course selection, because that course selection in 8th grade sets the trajectory for all of high school. But for our juniors, what should they be thinking about?
So juniors, the college process has already started. So they should be spending the next couple of months finalizing that college list. So having a balanced list of target, reach, and safety schools and understanding what the word fit means for them. My definition of fit works is number 1, admissions. Can you get in? Number 2, can you afford it? And number 3, can you see yourself at that campus environment? So college tours, I think right now for juniors over spring break is hugely important to start getting your feet on the campus and start taking a look at some of the campuses. Spring break is an excellent time to do some of those tours. Students can talk with admissions officers, ask questions about majors, hear about the student life, what the different programs are. And all you need to do, all juniors will need to do is just call the admissions office and find out about tours. By the end of the junior year, students should have gone to their teachers and asked for letters of recommendation. Typically it's 2 letters of recommendation from core teachers. The students should ask in person. I always tell students, do not email your teacher and ask. It's a very personal thing. And put together a brag sheet for the teacher. So what a brag sheet to me means is something that the student took away from the course that the teacher can write about in the letter. And it'll give the teacher some food for thought when they're writing the letter. And then another thing to think about is counselor recommendations. Some of these colleges will require a school counselor recommendation. So it's up to the student to meet with the school counselor to find out what needs to be done for that particular letter. Over the summer, the Common App is open and right now, and so students can start working on the Common App. But typically what I do with my students over the summer is I work with them on their essays, the main essay first, and then if we have time, which hopefully we will now, then we start working on the supplements before they get back to school. Some schools might have 2 or 3 supplement questions that the student will have to answer regarding either major or campus. So it's a good idea for students to start working on that Common App now.
Thank you, Lisa. It always seems like, that one Common App essay, it won't be that bad. But to your point, so many schools have these supplemental essays, and although they're shorter, they're really time consuming because you have to really individualize it for each college.
Yes. And when they're doing their tours, I encourage my students to take notes while they're on campus, because some of the questions will be, why University of Michigan? So you have to answer those questions. What is it about this particular school that you enjoy or you are interested in? And you have to have have done some research on the school to have that information.
I want to go back to the questions real quick, Lisa. Jennifer said, what if your child has ADHD and isn't really going to take all these AP and honors classes? I can speak to that personally myself. My one of my sons, only with ADHD, only took one AP class, but he ended up getting into every college on his list. He was waitlisted into one, but we had a super balanced list. He had a very appropriate list. So it doesn't mean that you have to be really heavy-handed in taking all these AP, IB, or dual enrollment classes. You don't. It's just that if you want to apply, if a lot of your list is highly selective schools, that is the expectation for those highly selective schools, but not necessarily for more middle of the road schools that look at, other things beyond grades and test scores. We've had this question lots of times, Lisa, about, the role of sharing the diagnosis. And we found that many of the kids that we've worked with in the last couple of years, it's just like part of them. It's part of their life, and they own it and they write their essays on it. There is a school of thought that you shouldn't share that, but we at Educational Connections don't believe that to be true. I wonder if you could talk about that for just a moment.
Yeah, I've worked with kids with learning disabilities, and it's a wide range of learning disabilities. So when we talk about fit, I also think that fit means for those particular kids to have the support services in place at the college. So by not disclosing that they have this learning disability, they may not find out what kind of support services is there tutoring? Is there a writing center? Do they have someone that they can meet with if they're struggling? All of those things play into that particular fit. I do think that sharing it in a positive way, because these kids, there's a college for everybody, and I can't stress that enough. But these kids, need to find where they are going to be successful, and it is possible.
Thank you for that, Lisa. So we know that juniors need to finalize their list, consider tours, ask for letters of recommendations, and ideally start chipping away. Definitely get their Common App done and the supplemental essays. But not just for juniors, for younger kids as well, they can really start to research colleges. I know this is what you do with all of your students, and start to categorize them into that most likely target or framework and reach. Tell us a little bit about that process of researching colleges and how you help kids that are in that space.
Yeah, the younger kids are always scared that they're going to make the wrong choice. So I try to help them to figure out how to research the schools. So it's never too early to start researching. Here's some things to take into then when I'm working with my students, and I have a whole list of questions that I ask them when we're putting together the list. But these are the common ones. Size, how big do you want it to be? Location, how far from home? Majors offered. What type of clubs or activities are you interested in doing? Do you want like a school with a lot of school spirit, big athletics? And then we talk a little bit about admissions rates. And so admissions, what does it mean for admissions rate? So typically when I'm setting up a list for a student, I try to get the admissions rate, and I'll just give you some examples. For Ivy League schools, for some of those highly competitive schools, an admissions rate is 2 to 10%. So when you have 100,000 applications, that tells you, 2 or 10% of how many students are getting in. For schools in Virginia, we can just talk about UVA has an admissions rate of 18%, which is very, very competitive. So when a person tells me that UVA is their safety school, it makes me a little nervous. Virginia Tech is about 56%, and James Madison is 86%. So that gives you kind of an idea of some of the admissions rate. So all of these schools for Virginia folks are in state. And so typically the big flagship schools, the state schools, have to give priority to their Virginia residents. So when you're talking about a UNC Chapel Hill or University of Michigan, that goes the same way. So their admissions rate that is posted may not be the same for an out-of-state student as it is for an in-state student. So schools like Duke and Stanford and MIT, 3 to 5%. Even though they're not considered Ivies, they still have a very competitive admissions rate. And University of Maryland this year took 60% of their class from the early action pool. So that tells you that they're looking at those students that are applying early. American University takes 87%. That's their admissions rate for their early decision folks. So research includes all of those things. You can do online tours if you're not ready to do a in-person tour, but taking schools off the list is as important as taking putting schools on the list, and understanding the college entrance requirements can also help.
So sometimes when we see, 50%, that's a lot, but actually it may not really be 50%, because 50% also includes students like recruited athletes or children of alumni. So if you don't have that, if that's not in your profile, it may even be less than that.
Correct. Right. For example, Amherst is 65% athletes. That is 65% of their class is athletes that have been recruited. And kids applying there that are not athletes have a harder time getting in.
So we talked a little bit about creating a list. And in addition to grades and having a list, there are other things that are within the student's control. And part of that is preparing for the SAT and ACT. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of the test optional movement that we now see?
Yeah, I tell all of my students to try the tests, just to try it, and then we make a decision about, are we going to send the scores or not send the scores. So there's this year, I would say probably all of my kids, we went through the list together, and I said, you're going to send them here, but you're not sending them here. And it came down to, looking at the average test scores for each of the universities. And there are some students that went completely test optional. My advice is to study for the test, to take some prep. A simple, course or signing up for the question of the day, but also keeping organized for those rising seniors, keeping organized on when the testing is, because I had a lot of students who waited and didn't take the test until November, which I was like, please sign up, please sign up, please sign up. And they didn't want to. And they missed some deadlines because they waited till November.
Thank you for that, Lisa. So let's talk about the changes within the SAT. And I found, really the Mid-Atlantic region, the DC area has predominantly been a College Board stronghold. The College Board produces the SAT, the AP tests, and the PSAT. Whereas if you lived in Chicago, you wouldn't really know much about the SAT. It's primarily ACT land. But here, because so many kids take the PSAT, they kind of stay on that trajectory and stay with the SAT. Let me share with you what's going to happen in the coming year. So this spring, some of the AP exams are going to be digital. And the College Board has said this is a school-based decision. So if your child is taking an AP exam right now, they can ask their teacher, is this test going to be paper and pencil? Or is it going to be a digital version? Then this fall, students are going to take a digital PSAT. And then in the spring of next year, they're going to take the digital SAT. So what we've been recommending is, well, Lisa, do you want to talk about what you've been recommending? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the differences and also comparing that to the ACT.
Sure. I just met with a student yesterday who we had this conversation, and he said to me, I don't do very well on the computer. Like, I can't really read on my computer screen very well. So I said to him, absolutely, I would take a paper pencil test. And I'm talking to all of my seniors, my rising seniors, and even potentially some of my rising juniors in this fall to take one paper pencil test and see how you do. I'm always about trying both the SAT and the ACT to see which one you like better and which one you do better on. Some kids might do better on an ACT than they do on an SAT. But I definitely think that what I've seen with the College Board and the online process, it makes me nervous, honestly.
So let's talk about those differences in the test, Lisa. What is staying the same? There's still a 1,600 point scale. So there's 800 points for evidence-based reading and writing, 800 points for math. It's still going to be proctored at school. So it's not going to be like you roll out of bed and take this at home. There's still going to be a testing location, and you can bring your laptop, or the school will issue you one. There still will be accommodations for kids with a 504 and IEP. It's generally the same subject matter, but what's changing is, like we said, it's going to be all digital, and it will be shorter, 2 hours instead of 3. And part of that is due to those really long reading passages are going to be condensed. Also in math, right now, there's a calculator section and a no calculator section. Which makes kids really nervous. But that's going to go away. It's just the whole thing is you're going to be able to use a calculator on. And the College Board says it's going to be more secure because every student is going to have a unique test. Right now, every kid pretty much has the same test. There are different versions, but now each child will have a different one. It's also going to be offered more frequently, so you have more chances to test, which I love. And I also like that you're going to get scores right away in a couple of days. Right now, it takes about 2 weeks. So one thing we recommend, we have a whole test prep division of the company that just prepares kids for tests. We only offer one-to-one tutoring. We used to do boot camps. We found that they were not effective when we looked at the data. Because kids need to practice over time. That's the best way to improve a score, is you have a session once a week, you do some homework, have another session instead of making it too condensed. So kind of like what Lisa said, we recommend that kids take a practice SAT and a practice ACT. We put those scores into a concordance table. They can do that this summer. And we share with kids which tests they scored best on. So about a third of kids will clearly do better on one test than another. But for about 2/3 of kids, it's kind of a toss-up, and it comes down to personal preference. So for kids that are juniors, for kids that are sophomores, they can start taking practice tests if they've gone through Algebra 2 in the spring of their sophomore year, the summer after their sophomore year, or the fall of their junior year. And we're going to be coming out with the summer test dates soon. So if a mock test is of interest to your child, this is your own information. It's not sent to the College Board. It's for you. You can scan this code and you can see the registration form and you can sign up. All right, so let's see. Any questions on testing before we move on? Oh, let's see. A couple of questions. For scores that require an ACT, is it an option to send an SAT? Yes, every school will take either test. Schools do not have preferences, and that's why we really encourage kids not to split their focus. Over the summer, if they're going to prep, do not prep for both tests. It's too much time. It's a lot of energy. If you're paying for a tutor, or a class, it just becomes even more money. So you want to focus your efforts and get more for the time you put in. So that's why just studying for one test is perfectly fine. Some schools do require, some colleges are, as Lisa mentioned, are test optional, but there are a number that still require tests. For example, in Florida, all the Florida colleges require a test. Same in Georgia. There are many colleges that still want a test, but for the majority, as Lisa mentioned, you can apply test optional. So we really take the approach in our college counseling that, hey, you may use this test and it can help your application stand out if you send it to safety and target schools, but maybe it's not in the ballpark for reach schools and you apply test optional to those schools. All right, so let's move on and talk about the resume. And Lisa, this is not the same resume as if a student is applying to a job. What does it mean in terms of admissions?
Right. So your resume is your most significant achievements that you have during high school. So a lot of times kids will ask me, does 8th grade count? 8th grade does not count. And I hate to say that because they feel like they've, put all this time in, but 8th grade does not count when you're talking about admissions. Colleges will look for consistency over the 4 years. So if a student has a multitude of activities and a spattering of extracurriculars, it doesn't look as good as if they've done 2 or 3 things really well. So you need to focus on the activities that you've had constant involvement in through high school. And it's not about numbers, it's about commitment. So here's an example, a couple examples of some good, what I've seen this year are some solid academic activities. So Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts are excellent because you've been in that for years. Other consistent other consistent activities, sports, and if you have leadership opportunities in the sports, if you're on a travel team, that looks good. So volunteering also looks good. If you're volunteering at the same place and you've taken on more responsibilities or even working at a job over the summer, those consistent activities are what the colleges are looking for. On the Common App, you can only list 10 activities and there's 150 character description. So you have a short window of what to say about it. So I just think it's a good idea for kids to really think about what they're involved in. I have an example. I've been meeting with this girl who's an excellent ballerina, but that's all she's doing. And while that's awesome that she does it, she doesn't want to do it in college. And so I said, okay, we need to figure out, what you can do while you're still doing your ballerina thing, what you can do as well to kind of build that activity list.
Thank you, Lisa. So, in addition to starting your resume and really being selective about what you're going to put on it, what else can kids do? Let's talk a little bit about classes that students can take.
Yeah, taking a summer class can help students explore potentially a major that they might be interested in. There are high school courses online. There's also community college courses. So not only can the course kind of direct you potentially in a major, but if you're taking a college level course, you have to see if your high school will let you transfer that college level course to your high school transcript, which could increase your GPA. Typically, college level courses are the same weight as an AP course. So some of the highly competitive colleges also, they always ask, why are you majoring in what you want to major in? And when you have a student that hasn't explored different types of major, it's a hard question to answer. It can also help students when they take a summer course to know that this is it, or no way, I don't want to do this. So some examples that students that I have worked with that want to study medicine, let's just say, their school didn't offer anatomy and physiology, so he took it at the local community college. I had a student that wanted to do some more business courses, so she ended up taking business courses through the community college. So there are different things that you can do, and some of those courses are online. So if a student feels academically ready for those classes, I would definitely try it and has the time.
I know a lot of colleges near us, like George Mason, for example, they have summer classes just for high school students. So those are awesome too. They don't get college credit, but they still can look really great on the resume. All right, what about summer work?
Yes. So any kind of experience over the summer, whether it's scooping ice cream, I use that because that's typically what some kids will do, working as a camp counselor, are definitely ways for kids to put things on their resume and have an experience and get a little bit of money. If you don't work, but you're trying to find an internship, I always tell my students, start with your family and see if there's someone in your family or friends network that can help you find an internship. Those are hard to find. But job shadows are something that you can do, on a day-to-day basis. You can go in and ask questions of somebody, see what they do all day. I think that helps students to say, oh, this looks interesting, or no way. I have students that have created their own business. Currently I'm working with an artist, and she's selling paintings and greeting cards on Etsy. So it's one of those things that if you have a talent, you can use your talent and create things. The last way is volunteering. And if you have a cause that you are interested in and a passion for, volunteering for some organization is an excellent way to give back to the community and put it on your resume. And the Virginia Tech supplement question this year was, their motto is that I may serve. So they wanted to know how this particular student that's applying to Virginia Tech, how they gave back to their community and how long they've been involved. So it can come up again.
That was good to know, Lisa. Thank you. What about summer programs that students can enroll in?
Yeah, so and I'm sure parents have heard of these. There are pre-college programs out there, and I always say buyer beware, because some are better than others. But it is another way for students to explore a field of interest. They may live on a college campus for a week, and they will take courses from the actual faculty that are teaching at the college. So they get the dorm experience, the meal experience, living away from home. In addition, they can get some academic experience. Some examples of these are Notre Dame has a great pre-college program. Boston University has some medical programs that students can take. If they get college credit, it's a bonus, because potentially they could start having a college transcript through these programs. But there are some programs that the college is not sponsoring, but an outside agency is sponsoring, and they're just using their facilities. So those are not as good as those that the college is actually sponsoring. And just to give you an example, I had a student this year who went to Johns Hopkins and did an aerospace engineering summer program. And when it came to why did you choose this major, he had he had helped on a mission to Mars with that particular program. So that was kind of fun.
I remember my older son got this letter in the mail. This was a number of years ago, and it said, guess what? You've been selected for this leadership program. And it just sounded so elite and wonderful. But the more I looked into it, I realized, wow, it really wasn't what I thought it was initially. I'm sure other parents have gotten letters like that.
Yes.
What do you think of those programs?
So I think the one you're talking about is the National Scholars. It sounds like National Honor Society, but it is not. It's National Scholars Achievement Award. They are very expensive. And while I've had students go to them and have a good experience, I don't think they're as good as when you are able to go on a college campus and learn from the actual faculty.
Thanks, Lisa. Let's kind of drill down into specific students and talk about how you help them. Let's start out with Billy, who was interested in aerospace engineering. What was his course load like? What did he do over the summer? What were his extracurriculars and what was his outcome?
So just so that the audience knows, we're going to go through 3 different students. And all of these students were in different places when I started with them. So Billy was the overachiever. So Billy knew from the day he was born that he wanted to be in aerospace engineering. This guy is pretty amazing. He would take pictures with his silly little Canon camera of the planets and the stars when he was a little, when he was 8, 9, 10. And then he actually became an Eagle Scout. So that was in his wheelhouse. He would watch YouTube videos on how to become an astronaut. And then he was the young man that went and ended up going to Johns Hopkins and doing the aerospace. His course load was only AP in the engineering type courses, physics and calculus and computer science. He took AP US history, but his main goal was to become an engineer. So, and he's choosing right now. He got into all of the schools minus one, which was Georgia Tech, but he got into Purdue and Clemson, and he's going to visit at this point, and he is going to make a decision by May 1st. So
Georgia Tech is so competitive.
Yes.
Unbelievably so. So over the summer, he went to the Johns Hopkins program.
Yes.
What else did he do over the summer?
Well, he had his Eagle Scout project, and so he had to do that during COVID, which was hard enough because how do you plan something where you're in the community during a COVID pandemic? But he ended up he did it, and that was his sophomore summer that he ended up doing it. So, and then last summer he went to the aerospace camp.
Awesome. Tell us about Mark.
Yes, well, Mark was an interesting young man. He did not have a lot of extracurriculars, but he had significant extracurriculars. For example, he was in Taekwondo, and he started out as just learning Taekwondo, and then he became an instructor. So right there, you can see kind of the progression of leadership that he took on. He wanted to do computers, but he wasn't sure which computer area he wanted to go into. He had taken one coding class, I think it was. And so when we talked, I suggested he try other computer certificates. So they were through companies, and he did several different types of computers, and he definitely landed on cybersecurity, which is what he wanted to do. And I kind of thought that was funny because, Taekwondo, you're learning how to protect yourself, and then cybersecurity, you're also learning how to protect your computer. But he is actually going to Purdue next year. He got in, and he's going to Purdue.
Awesome. What about Sally?
So Sally was a sophomore when I started working with her last year. She was one of those students that I don't know what I want to major in. I have no idea what I'm doing. I need some help. And so, she was taking some honors courses, and her level of work, she was capable of doing APs, but I think she was a little afraid of taking APs. So I kind of told her, let's start slow. And she ended up taking 2 APs her junior year. She took English and psychology. And we did some career assessments with her because she really didn't have any idea what she wanted to do. And it seemed like she landed on business as an area of interest. So over her sophomore to junior summer, I suggested she try the Syracuse University Business Finance and Leadership program. She ended up going and doing that. When she came back this year as a junior, she took a business and a personal finance course through her high school. So we're talking right now about what she's going to do this summer. I think she ended up doing DECA, which is the competition for the business area. And she's going to continue doing that her senior year. I think she might take a few more business classes at the community college this year. But she's definitely, and she's going to do AP Economics, which she was afraid of, but she's definitely going to do that next year in addition to AP English. And she's got Syracuse on her list as a potential school for her to apply to. So those summer programs, not only are they can be helpful in directing you into what major, but they can also light your fire about a school. So.
Great, thank you. I think a lot of parents can relate to students that aren't sure what they want to do, which is perfectly normal at this age.
Right.
Lisa, there are so many changes when it comes to college admissions, and we've all heard about them and just reading the news recently. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your perception of the impact of AI on college admissions. Can you tell us what might be on the horizon for kids that are coming up in high school and what to expect later on?
So this Chat GPT that is out right now, I think is making major waves in college as far as kids using it for writing essays. So there's discussion right now with the college admissions people about how do we know that this student actually wrote this particular essay and not a computer, not a robot. So it's too early to tell what's going to happen. So I don't want to blanket this and say this is going to change, but I do know that the college admissions people are talking about it. The research about the AI writing these personal statements are that they are not as good. They are not a personal statement. They are written by a computer. So they don't have a way right now to kind of detect, like some schools use Turnitin to detect if a student's been plagiarized, but they don't have a way to detect this right now. But I think it's something that they're working on, but potentially there could be some changes coming down the pike to the essays, whether they might be more interview type, or they might be, kind of looking for these fake essays. So we'll have to it's a wait and see thing about what will happen, but potentially there could be some changes coming. So those decisions usually get made over the summer. So we'll have to wait and see.
Thanks, Lisa. So ultimately, we can't really control the future of admissions, but there are certain things that families can control.
Yeah, so I was reading an article about Rick Clark, who is the executive director of admissions at Georgia Tech, and his stance about the whole admissions process is that 75% students have control over. You decide where and when you're going to apply. You tell the story in your application that best represents you, your strengths, interests, and hopes. You choose to listen to take guidance from. And you can determine the mindset, how you approach the experience. So I think some kids have this, I deserve to get in here, and then they are disappointed. But if students stay open and realize there are a number of schools that could be a great match, they will definitely feel more fulfilled when the decisions arrive.
That's for sure. And we're here to help. If we can assist you as your child goes through the college selection process, we would love to help. Erin Ebert is our college consulting program director. She's been with the company. This year will be 13 years. So she knows college consulting well. And you can talk to her by calling our number, or you can get on her calendar just by grabbing your phone and scanning this QR code. And you can set up a call with her to share about your child and see if what we offer is a match for what you're looking to do with your student. And we start with kids that are rising 8th graders through rising 12th graders. So I'm going to go to Q&A in just a second. But Lisa, I want to thank you so much for being my guest and lending your expertise this evening. And thank you to everybody for joining us. I want to let you know that our next webinar is all about AP exams, how to improve scores and stand out for college admission. And I have with me our other consultant, Kristen Landis, on this webinar, and she's amazing. She worked in UVA admissions for 11 years, and that is February 23rd at 7 p.m. And you can register by scanning this QR code or on our website, EC Tutoring. You'll see all about our college process. We write a blog on different topics, and you can also see our webinar series. Okay, so Let's go to Q&A, and after Q&A, I want to let you know a survey will pop up on your screen, and if you could be so kind to fill out that survey, that would be amazing. So thank you. Let's see. If my child does poorly in a summer school class, should they mention it? That's from Marie.
They do not have to. That's kind of the glory of taking a summer school class. They don't have to mention it on their application. Especially if it's a college transcript, you just wouldn't send the college transcript.
One parent says, I'm not so sure about college interviews. She's worried that her child won't do well. Can you tell us a little bit about interviews? Because for many colleges, most colleges do not offer interviews, but some do. What if you have a child where you're kind of worried about how they might present at an interview?
So the bigger schools will not offer you an interview. And I'm an alumni interview for my college. And I think my takeaway when I submit the form for back to my college is, are they going to fit at the school versus personality versus anything? Do I see them as a good fit for the school, the experience that I had? So there are some alumni interviews out there that just write up a certain kind of brief synopsis of the conversation. If your child does not interview well, I'm always about trying and seeing. I think that, our whole life we're talking with people and we are interacting. So the more practice some kids can have, the better. And maybe, I work with some of my kids. I actually had a student that was applying to the Air Force Academy, and that's a requirement for him, was the interview. So what we did was I presented him with a list of questions prior to that, I thought would be asked. And then him and I ran through the questions and got to practice, and he did really well in the interview. So he came back and said pretty much everything I asked was spot on. So I do think it does take some practice.
Talk about a crystal ball. That's impressive, Lisa. So one mom said, this is so common. She's not sure what her child wants to major in. And one of the things I think can be super helpful is the survey that we do with kids as part of College Planner Pro. Can you talk a little bit about how you help kids find their unique gifts, even when they're not so sure about what they're good at?
Yeah, there are 4 assessments that we use on College Planner Pro. They're called AchieveWorks. They look at intelligences, personality, learning style, and they help. What they do is the student just asks questions, they answer questions, and then in a session, we just go over the results. The personality one seems to be the most popular, and it's based on the Myers-Briggs. And so I just did this last week, students are excited to find out a little bit more about themselves. And what this particular one will do is then identify careers that we will then look at in one of our sessions. One of the things I do with my juniors specifically is I pull up majors for them, and we look at the actual coursework that is required for particular majors. And I'm working with a student who wants industrial design, and he knew he wanted the art side of industrial design and not the engineering side. So we literally took all of the curriculum and looked at both of them to make sure that the schools he's applying to, it is an art-based major than it is more of an engineering. So I do try to help students dive in and look a little bit deeper into majors by using both the assessments as well as the college list of classes that they need to take.
That's great. Thank you so much. Well, a couple of SAT, ACT questions. Jennifer asked, should my child be taking Algebra 2 to take standardized tests? And ideally, yes. I would wait until near the end of Algebra 2 for them to take a standardized test, if that's appropriate. Another question is, what's the difference between the SAT and the ACT? And I'd say the biggest difference is that the SAT is considered a power test. The questions require a lot more thought and analysis, a lot more critical thinking. So there are fewer questions on the test, but you have to really be able to read between the lines and figure out what they're asking you. Whereas on the ACT, It's a faster paced test, so there are more questions, but the questions are much more straightforward. And often kids say, like, I like this test because these are questions that I see in school. So they're definitely different tests, and I would say for that reason, have your student take both practice tests. Sometimes we have kids that just take an ACT practice test, and then we'll take their PSAT scores, and try to do really compare them to see which test is best. It's not a perfect comparison, but it's good enough for kids that don't want to invest time in taking 2 practice tests. Let's see. Is calculus tested? And no, calculus is not tested on the SAT or ACT, which is good, right? Let's see, Lisa. How do I find out schools that have a good academic support? How do you know how do you differentiate schools that, just have run-of-the-mill support, or that have more in-depth support for a student?
So what I have recommended for my students that are willing to do this and their parents is to actually call the disability office at at the schools that they're interested in and have a conversation. Sometimes they will want to see some of the documentation that you have to see what types of disability that there is, and then they can tell you, and you can get a feel for how supportive that particular school is. And they're not afraid to talk. I mean, that's their job. They are in the disability office. That's all they work with is kids with disabilities. Every college is going to have one. There are particular colleges out there, like University of Arizona pops into my brain, that have these programs called SALT, that are student supported. They are definitely set aside for student support, and they have a lot of kind of like outreach and tutoring, and they check in with the students once a week. They're a little bit more hands-on than some other schools that might just have a writing center or learning center.
Thank you for that, Lisa. All right, so we had another question. Hold on one second. About how to stand out. This one parent said, the environment in which my child is in is so hyper competitive, where everybody has really good grades. What can I do? How do I help my student to stand out?
So I do, not every kid is applying to every single school, the same schools. So kids are actually competing against each other within their school. So what I would do is start researching schools that maybe might be, have some of the in-state schools, or schools that other kids are applying to, but have like a list of schools. Typically kids will apply from 7 to 12 schools. And directing some of their experiences so there's some commonality. Like, for example, my student that wanted to be in aerospace, he definitely took the right courses. He was taking, AP physics, AP calculus, AP English, those type of courses. And then, he had some summer experiences that showed that he wanted aerospace. So I think the more common themes that you can come up with help students stand out in the application process.
Thank you. Laura wants to know what happens when the school doesn't even offer any APs. Is this a deficit?
No, it's not, because what happens, the college will look at their school profile that's available and see that they do not offer APs, and understand that whatever the highest level, of if it's honors, or if it's some schools offer IB, some schools offer AP, but they will look and see what the highest level the student is able to take.
So Bethel is in an argument with her son. She said her son is completing pre-calculus this year as a sophomore, and she wants him to do calculus next year. But he said, Mom, I already did the minimum requirement. I already took 2 years of math. And she wants to know, won't it look bad if he doesn't take any math in 11th or 12th grade?
Yes, I'm in
Agreed.
agreement with her. So he needs, of course, when you go to college, you're going to end up taking math potentially. I would say most colleges have at least one math class in their general ed requirements, which means he would have taken 2 years off for math and then be thrown into a college level math class. So I would say he definitely should be taking math his junior and senior year, whatever the school offers. And he does not necessarily have to take AP calculus. He could take calculus and then statistics, but just to keep the rigor in his curriculum for the math, definitely.
Dana said they're really up against the schedule this summer. Her son plays varsity football and only really has about 6 weeks of summer available. And then when you factor in a family vacation, there's really limited time. What's a parent to do with a student with limited time? What's the best way to fill it?
So actually, I was working this year with a student who wanted to play Division I football. He managed to fit things in that were within school. Like he was, I think he did some volunteer service. He actually taught football to little kids. He was like a counselor. So I always say that downtime, they really need to fill that downtime that they're not in season with doing something. And granted, I know I was an athlete, so I know how much time I had all through high school, but I still found time to be part of the clubs in the yearbook and things like that.
So 2 more questions from Kristen. What do I do if my child has only maybe one AP class, but a bunch of honors and a dual enrollment mixed in? Is that good? Or will they get dinged for not taking more AP classes?
Well, I get this question a lot, and it all comes down to where are they thinking of applying? You have to remember that at those highly selective schools, like I said, those particular kids are taking a lot of AP, IB, a lot of honors classes. So, when you can't make a generalization, will he get dinged? If he picks the right college, he could potentially get into that particular college with a huge grant or loan, or a scholarship, I mean. So it's that's a hard question. I think he needs to, if he stretch himself a little bit and see what he can do. But if he's at his limit, he's at his limit.
Our last question, Marie says, if a child is leaning towards an engineering major, do they need advanced physics, or is regular okay? And how high of a math do they need their senior year?
So calculus for sure, whether it be AB or BC, or just a regular calculus class. And they definitely should be taking physics, whether that be AP or honors physics or regular physics, but they need some exposure to both calculus and physics.
Awesome, Lisa. Thank you so much for lending your expertise with our families this evening. It was really wonderful to have you on. And thank you, parents, for being here this evening. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the school year. And if we can assist you in any way, please feel free to reach out. Thank you, everybody, and have a great evening.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.